Marcus Hale had exactly 17 minutes to decide whether to ruin his career, risk losing his daughter, or walk away from the one woman who made him feel alive again. The decision should have been easy. It wasn't. Because sometimes the right choice looks like the biggest mistake you could ever make, and the safe path leads straight to a lifetime of regret. If you want to know how a single rainy night can unravel a man's entire existence and rebuild it into something he never knew he needed, stay with me until the end of this story. And if you're watching this right now, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're tuning in from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Marcus Hale's life ran on schedules. Wake up at 5:47 a.m., coffee at 6:02, breakfast with Emma at 6:30, scrambled eggs, never fried, because she claimed fried ones tasted like rubber tires, though Marcus suspected she'd never actually tasted a tire. Drop her off at Riverside Elementary by 7:45, then hit the office by 8:15. Lunch at his desk. Leave at 5 sharp to pick Emma up from after-school care. Dinner. Homework. Bath time. Bed by 8:30. Repeat. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't spontaneous, but it worked. Marcus had learned the hard way that excitement and spontaneity were just code words for chaos, and chaos was what had taken Emma's mother from them 3 years ago. Not literally. Sarah was alive and well, probably sipping margaritas in Scottsdale with her new husband. But she'd walked out when Emma was 4, leaving behind a stack of unpaid credit card bills, a note that said, "I can't do this anymore," and a little girl who kept asking when mommy was coming home. So Marcus built a life that didn't leave room for variables. Variables meant risk, and risk meant losing control, and losing control meant someone got hurt. Usually Emma. The systems worked. They had to. Which made the events of October 14th all the more jarring. The day started normal enough. Emma had insisted on wearing her Princess Elsa dress to school despite the weather forecast calling for heavy rain. Marcus had negotiated her down to the dress with a raincoat over it, which she'd agreed to only after he promised they could have pancakes for dinner. Small victories. Work was the usual grind. Marcus had been a project manager at Caldwell and Associates for 6 years, long enough to be good at it, not long enough to stop caring. The company designed urban infrastructure projects, which sounded more interesting than it actually was. Most days involved spreadsheets, conference calls with contractors who couldn't stay on budget, and meetings that could have been emails. He liked it that way. Predictable. Controlled. Around 3 p.m., the rain started. Not the gentle Pacific Northwest drizzle Portland was famous for, but the kind of aggressive downpour that made you question your choice to live in a city where the sun was a seasonal guest. By 4:30, the office windows were streaked with water that looked less like rain and more like someone was throwing buckets at the building. Marcus was packing up his laptop when he heard the commotion near the elevators. "No, no, no! Come on, you piece of—" He looked up to see Ivy Carter standing by the window, phone pressed to her ear, her other hand pressed against the glass like she could will the storm to stop through sheer frustration. Ivy worked in the design department, 2 floors up. Marcus knew her the way you know anyone in a mid-sized office. Familiar face in the break room, occasional nod in the hallway, name on emails he was CC'd on for projects he barely paid attention to. She was younger than him, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair usually pulled back in a bun that looked effortlessly put together in a way Marcus could never achieve with his own hair, which had a habit of sticking up at odd angles no matter how much product he used. She was also, according to the office rumor mill, some kind of design prodigy. Fresh out of grad school 2 years ago and already leading projects that usually went to people with a decade more experience. None of which mattered to Marcus because he made it a point not to get involved in office politics or office anything beyond what his job required. But right now, Ivy looked like she was about to either cry or throw her phone through the window. "You're sure?" she was saying into the phone. "Like completely dead? Not just, okay, yeah. No, I'll figure it out, thanks." She hung up and stared at the rain like it had personally betrayed her. Marcus should have walked away. Should have headed to the elevator, picked up Emma, gone home, stuck to the schedule. But something about the look on Ivy's face, defeated but trying to hold it together, made him pause. "Car trouble?" he asked. Ivy jumped slightly, like she hadn't realized anyone was nearby. "Oh, yeah, battery's completely dead. I've been meaning to get it checked for weeks, but she gestured vaguely, like the universe itself had conspired against her maintenance schedule. A AA? 2-hour wait. Apparently everyone in Portland decided to have car problems today. Marcus glanced at his watch. 4:38. He had 22 minutes to get to Emma's school before they started charging late fees. He could make it if he left right now. I can give you a ride, he heard himself say. Ivy blinked. What? A ride? I'm heading out anyway. Where do you live? Oh no, I couldn't. I mean, you don't have to. Northwest? Southeast? Northwest? Near Wallace Park. But seriously, it's out of your way. I can just wait. It's not out of my way, Marcus lied. It was absolutely out of his way. Wallace Park was a solid 20 minutes in the opposite direction of Emma's school. He was going to be late. He was never late. What the hell was he doing? Are you sure? Ivy asked, and there was something in her voice, not quite hope, but the cautious edge of someone who'd learned not to expect help, and was surprised when it appeared. Yeah, Marcus said, committing to a decision that felt both impulsive and inevitable. Let's go before it gets worse. They made a run for the parking garage, which proved optimistic. By the time they reached Marcus's car, a 7-year-old Honda Accord that had seen better days, they were both soaked. Ivy's carefully constructed bun had collapsed into wet strands stuck to her neck. Marcus's shirt was plastered to his chest. They sat in the car for a moment, dripping onto the seats, and then Ivy started laughing. This is ridiculous, she said. Yeah. I look like a drowned cat. You look fine. She glanced at him, still smiling. You're a terrible liar. Marcus started the car. Buckle up. The drive should have been awkward. They barely knew each other. The rain was loud enough that conversation required effort, but somehow it wasn't. How long have you been at Caldwell? Ivy asked. 6 years? You? 2. Feels like 10 some days. Davidson's still making everyone redo their drafts 6 times? Ivy groaned. 7 times on the Morrison project. I swear he just likes watching us suffer. He does. I worked under him for 3 months when I first started. Worst quarter of my life. How'd you escape? Transferred to ops. Less creative freedom, but also less creative torture. Ivy laughed, and Marcus found himself smiling despite the fact that he was now officially late to pick up Emma and his carefully maintained schedule was disintegrating in real time. His phone buzzed. Text from Riverside Elementary's aftercare program. Just a reminder that pickup ends at 6 p.m. Late fees apply after that. Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced at the clock. 5:03. Even if he dropped Ivy off right now and drove straight to the school, he'd barely make it. Everything okay? Ivy asked, noticing his expression. Yeah, fine. You just went full stress face. I don't have a stress face. You absolutely do. It's the same face Davidson makes when someone suggests maybe we don't need another revision. Marcus exhaled. I have to pick up my daughter. I'm going to be late. There was a pause. You have a daughter? Yeah, Emma. She's 7. I didn't know that. Not something that comes up much at work. Another pause. Ivy was looking at him differently now, like she'd just received new information that required recalculating her entire impression of him. You should have said something, she said. I can call a lift. Seriously, you don't have to. It's fine. We'll make it. Marcus, it's fine, he repeated more firmly. They drove in silence for a moment. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was getting worse. Can I ask you something? Ivy said. Sure. Why'd you offer me a ride? You don't even know me. Marcus considered this. Why had he? It wasn't like him to deviate from the plan. Wasn't like him to take on someone else's problem, especially when it meant risking his own carefully constructed routine. You looked like you needed help, he said finally. Lots of people need help. Yeah, but you were right there, Ivy smiled slightly. That's decent of you. Not really, just pragmatic. Still counts. They pulled up to a small apartment building near Wallace Park. The rain was coming down so hard that Marcus could barely see the entrance through the windshield. This is me, Ivy said, but she didn't move to get out. Thank you. Really, you didn't have to do this. No problem. She reached for the door handle, then hesitated. Do you want to come in, just until the rain lets up a bit? I feel bad sending you back out in this. Marcus glanced at the clock. 5:17. If he left right now, he could still make it to Emma's school by 6. Barely. I should go, he said. Right, of course. Your daughter. But Ivy still wasn't moving, and Marcus found himself not moving either. The rain hammered against the roof, water streamed down the windows. Inside the car felt like a separate world, insulated from everything outside. It's not going to let up, Ivy said quietly. Weather report said this system's here for another 2 hours at least. She was right. Marcus knew she was right. And sitting in this car, soaking wet, staring at a wall of rain, suddenly felt like the stupidest possible option. Okay, he said, just for a minute. They ran for the entrance. Ivy fumbled with her keys, laughing and swearing as water poured down her face. Marcus stood behind her, rain soaking through his shoes, wondering what he was doing and why he couldn't seem to make himself care about the answer. The apartment was small but warm. Ivy flipped on the lights, revealing a space that looked lived in without being messy. Books stacked on the coffee table, a half-finished mug of tea on the kitchen counter, a blanket draped over the couch like someone had been curled up there recently. I'm going to grab some towels, Ivy said. Make yourself comfortable, or as comfortable as you can while dripping all over my floor. She disappeared down a hallway. Marcus stood awkwardly in the entryway, very aware that he was creating a small puddle on the hardwood. His phone buzzed again. Another text from the aftercare program. Hi, Mr. Hale, just checking. Are you on your way? Emma's asking about you. Guilt hit him like a physical weight. Emma. He'd gotten so caught up in, what? Giving a coworker a ride? Standing in her apartment dripping water and feeling like a teenager who'd just been invited inside by his crush? He wasn't a teenager. He was a 32-year-old single father who had responsibilities and a child who needed him, and a life that didn't have room for whatever this was. Here. Ivy reappeared with towels. She'd changed into dry clothes, sweatpants and an oversized flannel shirt that made her look younger, less like the polished professional from the office and more like someone real. Thanks, Marcus said, taking a towel and attempting to dry his hair, which was a lost cause. Coffee? Tea? I think I have beer somewhere. I'm good. You're still soaking wet. I'm fine. Ivy raised an eyebrow. Do you ever just accept help? Like, as a general practice? Not really. Why not? Because help comes with expectations. That's bleak. Marcus shrugged. That's experience. Ivy looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she smiled. Coffee it is. You look like you need it. She moved to the kitchen, and Marcus should have left. Should have said thanks but no thanks, should have walked out the door and driven to Emma's school and gotten back to his life. Instead, he sat down on the couch. The apartment smelled like vanilla and something else. Lavender, maybe. Rain continued to pound against the windows. Ivy moved around the kitchen with easy familiarity, pulling mugs from cabinets, measuring coffee into a French press. So, she said, not looking at him. Emma, that's a pretty name. Thanks. Is her mom, are you divorced? Well, not technically, never married, but she's not in the picture. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off. Ivy glanced at him. That's another bleak statement. You want the truth or the polite version? Truth. Marcus leaned back against the couch. The towel was draped around his shoulders, and he was still damp, but the warmth of the apartment was starting to seep into his bones. Emma's mom left when she was 4, he said. Just decided one day that being a parent wasn't what she wanted. Packed a bag, left a note, and that was it. We haven't heard from her since, except for the occasional birthday card that shows up 3 weeks late. Jesus. Yeah. How'd Emma handle it? She didn't. Not well, anyway. Nightmares for months. Kept asking when Mommy was coming back. I didn't know what to tell her. Eventually, she stopped asking. Ivy was quiet, pressing the coffee. When she brought the mugs over, her expression was softer. That's a lot to carry, she said. It's just life. Still, they sat in silence, drinking coffee. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. Marcus checked his phone. 5:34. He was already late. The late fees would apply. Emma would be confused about why he wasn't there on time. The schedule was broken. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to move. Can I tell you something? Ivy said. Sure. When I saw you in the office today, I thought you were going to walk right past me. Everyone else did. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I was standing there, freaking out about my car, clearly having a minor crisis, and at least 5 people walked by without saying a word. Like I was invisible. You were the only one who stopped. Maybe they didn't notice. They noticed. They just didn't care. She paused. Why did you care? It was a good question. Marcus didn't have a good answer. I don't know, he said honestly. You looked like you needed help. And you're the kind of guy who helps. I guess. That's rare. Shouldn't be. Ivy smiled. No, it shouldn't. The conversation drifted after that. They talked about work, safe territory. Ivy told him about the Morrison project, how Davidson had made her redo the entire schematic because he didn't like the font choice on the labels. Marcus told her about the time a contractor had accidentally ordered 14,000 feet of rebar instead of 1,400 and tried to bill it to the project anyway. They talked about Portland, about how neither of them were originally from here. Ivy had grown up in Sacramento, moved north for grad school, and stayed because she couldn't imagine going back. Marcus had come from Chicago 8 years ago, following a job offer that paid better than staying ever would have. They didn't talk about anything serious, nothing deep. But the space between them felt charged in a way Marcus couldn't quite name. Around 6:15, his phone rang. Emma's aftercare coordinator. Excuse me, Marcus said, stepping into the hallway. Mr. Hale? Hi, this is Jennifer from Riverside. Just wanted to check in. Emma's still here waiting for pickup. I know. I'm sorry. I got stuck across town in the storm. I'm on my way now. No problem. Just wanted to make sure everything was okay. We'll keep her entertained until you get here. Thanks. I'll be there as soon as I can. He hung up and stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at his phone. The guilt was back, heavier now. Emma was waiting. Emma was always waiting for him to pick her up, to make dinner, to tuck her in, to be the parent that her mother hadn't been. And here he was, sitting in a coworker's apartment, drinking coffee, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. When he walked back into the living room, Ivy was standing by the window, looking out at the rain. I have to go, Marcus said. She turned. I know. I'm already late. I know. I shouldn't have stayed this long. Probably not. They looked at each other. The air between them felt thick. Thanks for the ride, Ivy said. And for stopping. You didn't have to. Yeah, I did. She smiled slightly. Why? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. He walked to the door. Ivy followed. When he reached for the handle, her hand landed on his arm. Marcus. He turned. I'm glad you stopped, she said quietly. He should have said something casual, something that kept the boundaries intact. Instead, he said, Me too. The drive to Emma's school was a blur. The rain was relentless. Traffic was worse. By the time Marcus pulled into the parking lot, it was 6:47, and the late fees had racked up enough to make him wince. Emma was waiting in the main room, sitting on a beanbag chair with a book in her lap. When she saw him, her face lit up. Daddy! She ran over and Marcus scooped her up, hugging her tighter than usual. I'm sorry I'm late, sweetheart. It's okay. Jennifer said you got stuck in the storm. I did. Was it scary? A little. Emma pulled back to look at him, her hands on his cheeks. But you're okay now. Yeah, Em, I'm okay. Good. She hugged him again, and Marcus felt the weight of the evening settle onto his shoulders. The deviation from routine, the lateness, the broken schedule, the look on Ivy's face when he'd said goodbye. On the drive home, Emma chattered about her day. Something about a science experiment with baking soda and vinegar, a dispute with another kid over who got to be the line leader, a drawing she'd made that was currently drying on the classroom wall. Marcus listened, made the appropriate responses, but his mind was elsewhere. What the hell had he been thinking? Ivy was a coworker, younger than him, probably not interested in a single father with a 7-year-old kid and a life built around routine and responsibility. He'd let himself get caught up in a moment, the rain, the coffee, the feeling of talking to someone who didn't need anything from him except conversation. But moments passed, and when they did, you were left with reality. Reality was pancakes for dinner because he'd promised Emma. Reality was helping with homework and supervising bath time and reading 3 chapters of the current bedtime book, which was something about dragons and a girl who could talk to them. Reality was his life, the one he'd built, the one that worked. By the time Emma was asleep, it was after 9. Marcus sat on the couch with a beer he didn't really want, staring at the rain still coming down outside. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Ivy. Got your number from the employee directory. Hope that's not creepy. Just wanted to say thanks again for the ride and for the conversation. I needed it more than I realized." Marcus stared at the message. He should ignore it, should delete it, should maintain the boundaries that kept his life stable. Instead, he typed back, "Not creepy. Glad I could help. Drive safe tomorrow." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "You too." Marcus set the phone down, picked up his beer, put it down without drinking. The rain kept falling. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that something had shifted, something small but significant, like the first crack in a dam that's been holding back a flood for years. He just didn't know yet whether that crack would break him or set him free. The next day at work, Marcus saw Ivy in the break room. She was making tea, her back to him, and for a moment he considered walking past, keeping it professional, pretending last night had been a one-time thing, an anomaly that didn't need to be repeated. Then she turned and saw him, and she smiled, and Marcus felt something in his chest tighten. "Hey," she said. "Hey, car's fixed. Turns out it was just the battery, like I thought." "Good." "Yeah." They stood there, the coffee machine gurgling between them. "So," Ivy said. "This is awkward." Marcus almost laughed. "A little. I don't usually text coworkers I barely know. I don't usually give rides to coworkers I barely know, so we're both out of our depth here." "Seems like it." Ivy stirred her tea, not looking at him. "For what it's worth, I had a good time. Last night, just talking." "Me too. Maybe we could do it again sometime." The talking part, not the getting caught in a storm part. Marcus should have said no, should have made up an excuse, should have protected the life he'd built. "Yeah," he said instead. "I'd like that." Ivy's smile widened. "Okay then." "Okay." She walked past him, and as she did, her hand brushed his arm, just for a second, barely noticeable, but Marcus felt it like an electric shock. He stood in the break room for a long moment after she left, staring at the coffee machine and wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. But deep down, under the anxiety and the guilt and the voice that told him he was making a mistake, there was something else. Hope. Small, fragile, barely there, but real. And Marcus, who'd spent 3 years building a life designed to keep hope at a safe distance, realized he didn't want to push it away this time. He wanted to see where it led, even if it scared him. Especially because it scared him. The thing about hope was that it made you stupid. Marcus knew this, had known it for 3 years, ever since Sarah walked out and left him holding the pieces of a life that suddenly didn't make sense anymore. Hope was what made you believe things would get better when all the evidence pointed to the contrary. Hope was what made you take risks you couldn't afford. Hope was dangerous. So when Monday morning arrived and Marcus found himself checking his phone for texts from Ivy before he'd even gotten out of bed, he recognized the warning signs. This was how it started. The small gestures that felt innocent but built into something bigger. The looking forward to seeing someone. The planning your day around the possibility of running into them. The feeling that the ordinary routine of your life had suddenly become more interesting. He'd felt this way about Sarah once. Look how that turned out. But the text was already there when he unlocked his phone. Coffee before work? Same place? Marcus stared at it for a long moment. The smart thing would be to say no. To maintain boundaries. To remember that he had a daughter who needed stability and a job that required focus and a life that didn't have room for complications. He typed back, 7:15? Perfect. See you there. Emma was already awake when Marcus went to get her up for school, sitting in bed with a book she was technically too young for but insisted on reading anyway. "Morning, sweetheart." "Morning, Daddy. Can I have waffles for breakfast?" "Freezer waffles or real waffles?" "Real waffles take too long." "Freezer waffles it is." They went through this morning routine, breakfast, getting dressed, the daily negotiation over whether Emma really needed to wear socks with her sandals despite the October chill. By 7 o'clock, they were in the car, and by 7:10, Marcus was dropping Emma at school with a kiss on the forehead and a reminder to be good, Then he drove to the coffee shop, his stomach doing something uncomfortable that felt suspiciously like nervousness. Ivy was already there, sitting at the same corner table they'd occupied before, 2 cups in front of her. She looked different in the morning light, more put together than she'd been that rainy evening, her hair back in its usual bun, wearing a dress that was professional but still somehow her. "Got you a black coffee again?" she said when Marcus sat down. "I'm starting to think you're very predictable. Is that bad?" "Depends. Is it intentional?" Marcus considered this. "Yeah, I guess it is." "Why?" "Because unpredictable means chaos. Chaos means things fall apart." Ivy tilted her head, studying him. "That sounds like there's a story there." "Not one I usually tell over coffee." "Fair enough." She took a sip of her own drink, something complicated with foam that Marcus couldn't identify. "So, how was your weekend?" "Farmer's market, pancakes, the usual. You?" "Mostly work, if I'm being honest. The Morrison project is eating my life." "Davidson's still making you redo everything?" "He's moved on to making me redo the redos. I'm currently on revision number 8 of something that was fine at revision 3. Marcus winced. "That's rough." "It's the job, but some days I wonder if it's worth it." "The job or the specific project?" "Both, maybe." Ivy looked out the window at the street starting to fill with morning traffic. "I spent 6 years in school learning how to design urban spaces that make people's lives better. Now I spend most of my time making minor adjustments to blueprints because someone doesn't like the font size on the labels. Welcome to the reality of infrastructure work." "Is this what you imagined when you started?" Marcus thought about that. "No, but I'm not sure I imagined much of anything. I needed a job that paid well enough to support a kid. This one did. Everything else was just details." "That's kind of sad." "It's practical." "Can it be both?" She had a point, but Marcus had spent 3 years building a life around practicality, and admitting that practicality sometimes felt like settling meant acknowledging that he had settled for a life that was functional but not fulfilling. They talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation flowing easily between work complaints and weekend plans, and the merits of different coffee brewing methods. It was comfortable, too comfortable. By the time Marcus checked his watch and realized they needed to leave for the office, he'd forgotten to maintain the careful distance he'd promised himself. "Same time tomorrow?" Ivy asked as they walked to their cars. "I have to drop Emma off. Mornings are tight." "What about lunch?" Marcus hesitated. Lunch was different. Lunch was visible. Lunch was the kind of thing people noticed and talked about, especially after the awkwardness at the market with Linda Chen. "Lunch sounds good," he heard himself say. Ivy smiled. "Great, I'll text you." She walked to her car, a small blue sedan that looked like it had seen better days but was at least running now, and Marcus stood there for a moment wondering what he was doing. This was how it happened. Small steps that felt innocent. Coffee. Lunch. Conversations that went deeper than surface level. Before you knew it, you were invested. Before you knew it, someone had the power to hurt you, or worse, hurt Emma. But when Ivy waved at him before getting in her car, Marcus waved back, and the smile on his face felt real, in a way smiles hadn't felt in a long time. Work that day was a blur of meetings and emails and a conference call with a contractor who was 3 weeks behind schedule and full of excuses. Marcus barely paid attention. His mind kept wandering back to the coffee shop, to the way Ivy had laughed when he'd made a joke about Davidson's revision addiction, to the fact that she'd texted him first. Around 11:30, his phone buzzed. "Thai place on 3rd Street? 12:30? Marcus looked at his calendar. He had a meeting at 2 that he couldn't miss, but lunch was theoretically open. "Works for me." "Perfect. Looking forward to it." 3 words. Looking forward to it. Such a simple phrase, but it carried weight. It suggested anticipation, interest, the possibility that this was becoming something more than just 2 coworkers being friendly. Marcus spent the next hour trying to focus on a budget report and failing spectacularly. The Thai place was small and crowded, the kind of restaurant that locals loved and tourists never found. Ivy was already seated when Marcus arrived, studying the menu with intense concentration. "I can never decide," she said without looking up. "Everything looks good." "Get the pad CEU. It's the best thing on the menu." "You've been here before?" "Emma and I come here sometimes. She's obsessed with their spring rolls." Ivy smiled. "Does Emma like spicy food?" "She thinks she does." Then she takes one bite and needs to drink an entire glass of milk. Sounds like she's brave. She's 7. 7-year-olds think they're invincible. They ordered pad see ew for Marcus, some kind of curry for Ivy that she assured the waiter she could handle spicy. While they waited for the food, the conversation drifted. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ivy said. Marcus tensed slightly. "Sure." "Emma's mom, you said she's not in the picture. Is that by choice or hers, not mine? She left when Emma was 4. Just decided one day that motherhood wasn't what she wanted. I came home from work and there was a note on the kitchen table." "That's awful." "It is. Emma still asks about her sometimes. Not as much as she used to, but enough that I know it bothers her." "How do you handle that?" Marcus shrugged. "Honestly, I don't know. I tell Emma that her mom loved her but wasn't ready to be a parent, which is probably a lie, but it's better than the truth." "What's the truth?" "That Sarah was selfish. That she wanted the Instagram version of motherhood, cute photos and matching outfits, but not the reality of late-night feedings and tantrums and the relentless everyday work of raising a human being." Ivy was quiet for a moment. "You're angry?" "Yeah, I am. Not for me, I got over that. But for Emma. She deserved better. She has you. That counts for something." "Some days I'm not sure it counts for enough." The food arrived, interrupting the conversation. They ate in relative silence for a few minutes, and Marcus wondered if he'd said too much. This was the problem with getting close to people. You started sharing the messy parts, the parts you usually kept hidden. "My dad left when I was 12, Ivy said suddenly. Marcus looked up. "He and my mom fought constantly. About money, about his drinking, about everything. One day, he just didn't come home. We found out later he'd moved to Nevada with a woman he met at a bar. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but I remember what it felt like, wondering if it was my fault. If I'd been better or quieter or less expensive, maybe he would have stayed. It wasn't your fault. I know that now. Took therapy in about 15 years, but I know it." Ivy met his eyes. "My point is, Emma's going to be okay. Because she has a parent who shows up. Who cares? Who's willing to do the hard work? Trust me, that matters more than you think." Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "Thanks. Just being honest." They finished lunch, splitting the bill despite Marcus's half-hearted attempt to pay for both. As they walked back toward the office, Ivy said, "This was nice. We should do it again." "Yeah, we should. Maybe this weekend, if you're free, we could, I don't know, not work-related, just hang out." Marcus knew he should say no. Should maintain the boundaries between coworker and friend, between casual conversation and actual relationship. Should protect the careful life he'd built. "Emma has a soccer game Saturday morning," he said, "but Saturday afternoon is open." "Perfect. Text me details?" "Yeah, I will." They parted ways at the elevator, Ivy heading to the 5th floor and Marcus to his desk on the 3rd. He sat down, opened his laptop, and stared at the budget report he was supposed to be reviewing. His phone buzzed. A text from Ivy. "Thanks for lunch, and for being honest. It means a lot." Marcus typed back, "Same." Then he sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what he was doing and why he couldn't seem to stop. The week developed a rhythm. Coffee. Tuesday morning, lunch Wednesday at a sandwich place near the office. A late-night text conversation Thursday when Emma was asleep and Marcus was restless and Ivy was apparently having the same problem. "Can't sleep," she'd texted. "Same. What are you thinking about?" "Work. Life. Whether I'm wasting my 20s in a job I'm not sure I love." Heavy thoughts for 11 p.m. "I know. Sorry, you probably don't want to hear this. I don't mind. What would you do instead? If not this job?" There was a long pause. Then, "Honestly, I don't know. That's the problem. I spent so long working toward this career that I never stopped to ask if it's what I actually want." Marcus understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. "You could change directions," he typed. "It's not too late." Says the guy who admitted he took his job because it paid well, not because he loved it. Fair point. We're both stuck, aren't we? In lives we built for practical reasons. Maybe. Or maybe we're just being smart. Practical doesn't mean wrong. No. But it doesn't mean right either. They texted back and forth for another hour. The conversation wandering from careers to childhood to whether penguins could be considered the best animal, Ivy's position, or if that honor belonged to dogs, Marcus's position. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation you had with someone who got you, who understood the weird spaces between what you wanted and what you had. When Marcus finally said goodnight and put his phone down, it was after midnight. He had to be up in less than 6 hours. Emma would be awake and demanding breakfast and asking questions he was too tired to answer coherently. But he was smiling. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect fall weather Portland occasionally delivered. Crisp air, clear sky, leaves turning colors that looked like someone had set the trees on fire. Emma's soccer game was at 9 o'clock, and Marcus stood on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering every time Emma touched the ball, even though she spent most of the game picking dandelions in the outfield. "She's very focused on those flowers," someone said next to him. Marcus turned to find another parent, a woman he vaguely recognized from previous games. "Yeah, soccer's not really her thing." "Then why is she playing?" "Because she wanted to try it. I figured even if she doesn't love the sport, she'll learn about teamwork and exercise and showing up even when you don't want to." The woman laughed. "That's very philosophical for youth soccer." "I overthink things." "I can tell." The game ended with Emma's team losing 3-1, though Emma seemed utterly unbothered. She ran over to Marcus with a fistful of dandelions and a smile that suggested she'd had the best time of her life. "Did you see me? I found 12 dandelions." "I saw. Very impressive." "Can we get ice cream?" "It's 10:30 in the morning." So, yeah, okay. We can get ice cream." They stopped at a small shop that sold artisanal ice cream in flavors Marcus didn't understand, but Emma loved. She got something with lavender and honey, and Marcus got plain vanilla because he was boring and fine with it. "Daddy," Emma said around a mouthful of ice cream. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are you happy?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You seem different, like lighter or something." Lighter, that was one way to put it. "I guess I am happy," Marcus said. "Why do you ask?" Emma shrugged. "You smile more, and you check your phone more, and you seem less, I don't know, less sad." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He thought he was hiding it well. The lingering sadness from Sarah's departure, the weight of being a single parent, the loneliness that came with building a life around routine and responsibility. Apparently, he'd been fooling himself more than he'd been fooling Emma. "I didn't know I seemed sad," he said carefully. "Not always. Just sometimes. Like when you think I'm not paying attention." "I'm sorry, Em." "Don't be sorry. I'm glad you're happier now." She paused, then added, "Is it because of Ivy?" There it was. The question Marcus had been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "Maybe partly," he admitted. "She's nice to talk to. Makes things more interesting." "Do you like her? Like her?" Marcus almost laughed at the elementary school phrasing. "Yeah, I like her." "Good. She seems nice. And she likes strawberries, so she has good taste." "Very important criteria, I know." They finished their ice cream and headed home. Marcus had texted Ivy earlier, asking if she wanted to meet up around 2, and she'd suggested a park near her apartment that had good walking trails. Emma was going to Mrs. Patterson's for the afternoon, a playdate with the neighbor's granddaughter who visited on weekends. At 1:45, Marcus dropped Emma off and drove to the park, his stomach doing that nervous thing again that he was beginning to recognize as the physical manifestation of hope. Ivy was waiting by the entrance, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft enough to touch. When she saw Marcus, she smiled, and he felt something shift in his chest. "Hey," she said. "Hey. Ready for a walk?" "As ready as I'll ever be." They started down one of the trails, fallen leaves crunching under their feet. The park was moderately crowded, families with kids, couples holding hands, the occasional serious jogger who made Marcus feel lazy just by existing. "How was the soccer game?" Ivy asked. "Emma spent most of it picking flowers. I think she's peaked as an athlete," Ivy laughed. "There are worse hobbies than botany." "True. How was your morning?" "Productive. I finally finished revision 8 of the Morrison project. Sent it to Davidson, fully expecting him to ask for revision 9 by Monday." "That's the spirit." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. the conversation flowing naturally between observations about the weather and questions about weekend plans. At some point, their hands brushed, and Marcus almost pulled away out of habit. But Ivy's fingers found his and held on, and Marcus let himself hold back. "This is nice," Ivy said quietly. "Yeah, it is." "Are we doing this, like, officially?" Marcus glanced at her. "Doing what?" "Dating, being a thing, whatever you want to call it." It was the question Marcus had been avoiding asking himself, because asking meant acknowledging that this was real, that it mattered, that it carried the possibility of both happiness and hurt. "Do you want to be?" he asked. "I asked you first." "That's not an answer." Ivy stopped walking, turning to face him. "Yes, I want to be. I like you, Marcus. I like spending time with you. I like that you're honest and careful and clearly love your daughter more than anything. I like that you're not afraid to admit when you're struggling. And I know this is complicated. You have Emma. We work together. There are 1,000 reasons this could get messy, but I still want to try." Marcus looked at her standing there in the middle of a park on a Saturday afternoon, leaves falling around them like some kind of romantic movie scene, and he felt the last of his resistance crumble. "Yeah," he said. "I want to try too." Ivy smiled, and then she kissed him. It was soft and brief and tasted like possibility. When they pulled apart, Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of something huge and terrifying and wonderful. "So we're official?" Ivy asked. "We're official." "Good." They kept walking, hands linked, and Marcus tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Tried not to catalog the risks or plan for the worst-case scenario. Tried for once to just be present in the moment and let himself feel happy. It was harder than it should have been. But when Ivy squeezed his hand and started telling him about a documentary she'd watched about urban planning in Tokyo, Marcus felt himself relax into it, into this, into the possibility that maybe, just maybe, taking a risk wouldn't end in disaster. They spent the afternoon walking and talking, stopping at a food cart for coffee, sitting on a bench by a pond watching ducks fight over breadcrumbs someone had thrown despite the "please don't feed the ducks" sign. "Do you ever wonder what your life would look like if you'd made different choices?" Ivy asked. "All the time." "Better or worse?" "I don't know. Different, definitely. But whether that's better..." Marcus thought about Emma, about the life they'd built together. "I can't regret the choices that led to Emma. Everything else is negotiable." Ivy nodded. "That's a good way to look at it. What about you? Any regrets?" "Plenty, but I'm trying to focus more on what I can change going forward rather than what I should have done differently in the past." "How's that working out?" "Ask me in 6 months." Marcus smiled. "Deal." By the time he picked up Emma for Mrs. Patterson's, it was after 5 o'clock. Emma was full of stories about the games she'd played and the snacks she'd eaten, barely pausing for breath as they drove home. "Did you have fun with Ivy?" she asked eventually. "Yeah, Em, I did." "Are you going to see her again?" "I hope so." "Good. I like her. She makes you smile." Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat on his couch with a beer and his phone. He thought about texting Ivy, then worried that would seem too eager, then reminded himself that he was 32 years old and worrying about seeming too eager was ridiculous. He typed, "Thanks for today. I had a really good time." Her response came almost immediately. "Me too. Same time next week?" "Yeah, definitely." Marcus set down his phone and stared at the ceiling. He was doing this, really doing this, dating someone, letting someone into his carefully constructed life, taking a risk that could pay off or blow up in his face. It terrified him. But somewhere underneath the fear was something else, something that felt suspiciously like hope, real hope, the kind that made you believe things could actually get better instead of just staying stable. And maybe, Marcus thought, maybe that was worth the risk. Maybe that was worth everything. The rumor started on a Tuesday. Marcus didn't know who started it, and in the end, it didn't matter. Office gossip had a life of its own. It didn't need facts or logic or even a kernel of truth. It just needed people bored enough to pass it along. He first heard about it from Tom Chen, one of the other project managers, who cornered him by the printer with an expression that fell somewhere between concerned and entertained. "Hey man," Tom said, glancing around like they were in a spy movie. "I feel like I should give you a heads up about something." Marcus didn't look up from the document he was copying. About what? There's talk. About you and Ivy Carter. That got Marcus's attention. What kind of talk? Tom shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable. Look, I don't believe it, but people are saying you two are, involved. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Involved. Yeah, like romantically. Someone saw you dropping her off at her apartment a few weeks ago, and then apparently you've been having lunch together, and Tom waved a hand vaguely. You know how it is. People fill in the blanks. Marcus's jaw tightened. We're friends. That's it. I know. But you know how HR gets about this stuff. Dating within the company, power dynamics, all that. And with you being senior to her, I'm not senior to her. We're in different departments. Still, just thought you should know what people are saying. Tom walked away, leaving Marcus standing at the printer with 30 copies of a safety compliance report and the sudden urge to put his fist through a wall. The truth was, Marcus and Ivy had been spending time together. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that crossed any lines. They'd had lunch a few times. Coffee twice. One dinner at a Thai place near her apartment where they'd talked about architecture and childhood pets and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Emma had come up in conversation, she always did, and Ivy had listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. It had been easy, natural, the kind of friendship Marcus hadn't realized he'd been missing until it appeared in his life. But he'd been careful, always careful, because he knew how things looked, knew that a 32-year-old single father getting close to a younger female colleague would raise eyebrows, and the last thing he needed was to give anyone a reason to question his judgment or his professionalism. Apparently careful hadn't been careful enough. By Wednesday, the rumor had evolved. Now, people weren't just saying Marcus and Ivy were dating, they were saying Marcus had pursued her, that he'd used his position to pressure her into a relationship, that it was inappropriate and probably violated company policy. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when reputation was on the line. Marcus tried to ignore it, tried to focus on his work, pick up Emma on time, maintain the routine that had kept his life stable for 3 years. But the whispers followed him. He could see it in the way people looked at him in meetings, the way conversations stopped when he entered the break room, the way his emails suddenly went unanswered for hours when they used to get immediate responses. On Thursday, he got called into Claire Davidson's office. Claire was the VP of operations, Marcus's boss's boss, and someone he'd interacted with maybe 5 times in 6 years. She was in her mid-50s, sharp as a blade, and had a reputation for being fair but unforgiving. "Close the door," she said when Marcus entered. He did, his pulse picking up. "I'm going to be direct," Claire said, folding her hands on her desk. "There are rumors circulating about you and Ivy Carter from the design department. I need to know if there's any truth to them." Marcus forced himself to stay calm. "We're friends. We've had lunch a few times. That's it." "Lunch at work or outside of work?" "Both." "And you're aware that Ms. Carter is significantly younger than you and in a less senior position?" "We're in different departments. I have no supervisory authority over her." "That's not the point, Marcus. The point is optics. The point is that people are talking, and when people talk, it creates problems. For you, for her, for the company." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "So I'm being penalized for having a friend?" "You're being advised to consider how your actions are perceived. There's a difference." "Is there? Because it sounds like you're telling me to stop talking to her." Claire's expression didn't change. "I'm telling you to be smart. If this is just a friendship, fine. Keep it professional. But if it's something more, you need to disclose it to HR. That's policy." "There's nothing to disclose. Then there shouldn't be a problem." Marcus left the office feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. He'd done nothing wrong. Nothing. But somehow he was the one being called in for a lecture about optics and perception and all the ways his life could be scrutinized and judged by people who didn't know him. He texted Ivy. "Need to talk. Can you meet after work?" Her response came 10 minutes later. "Everything okay?" "Not really. Same coffee place as last time?" "Yeah, 5:30. Marcus spent the rest of the day trying to focus and failing. When 5 o'clock hit, he was out the door, picking up Emma from aftercare and dropping her at his neighbor Mrs. Patterson's apartment with a promise to be back in an hour. The coffee place was a small shop 2 blocks from the office. The kind of place that served overpriced lattes and played indie music at a volume that made conversation possible but not easy. Ivy was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. "Got you a black coffee," she said as he sat down. "Figured you'd need it." "Thanks." She studied his face. "What happened?" Marcus told her. The rumors, the meeting with Claire, the implication that he was doing something inappropriate just by being her friend. Ivy's expression darkened as he talked. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, then said, "This is my fault." "What? No, it's not. I asked you to have lunch. I texted you first. Ivy, stop. You didn't do anything wrong." "Neither did you, but you're the one getting hauled into your boss's office." "Yeah, well, that's how it works." Ivy shook her head, frustrated. "It's not fair." "No, it's not." They sat in silence. The coffee shop's speakers were playing something acoustic and melancholy. Outside, the street was busy with people heading home from work, faces tired and blank. "What do we do?" Ivy asked finally. Marcus had been thinking about that all day. The smart move was obvious: distance himself from Ivy, let the rumors die down, go back to his carefully controlled life where nothing unexpected happened and no one had a reason to question his judgment. The smart move was the safe move. And Marcus was so tired of safe. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me wants to tell everyone to go to hell and keep doing what we're doing. The other part knows that's stupid and reckless and could cost me my job. Would they really fire you over this? Maybe not fire, but make my life difficult enough that I'd want to leave? Yeah, probably." Ivy's jaw tightened. "That's bullshit. Welcome to corporate America." She looked at him, something fierce in her eyes. "I don't want to stop being your friend because people can't mind their own business." "Neither do I." "So what do we do?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "I have to think about Emma. If this blows up, if I lose my job or get reassigned or whatever, she's the one who pays the price. And I can't let that happen." "I know. So maybe we need to cool it for a while, just until things settle down." The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but they were the responsible thing to say. The practical thing. The thing that protected Emma, which was always the priority. Ivy nodded slowly. "Yeah, okay, if that's what you think is best." She looked down at her coffee, and Marcus could see her trying to hide her disappointment. It mirrored his own. "For what it's worth," Marcus said quietly, "this sucks." "Yeah," Ivy said, "it really does." They finished their coffee in near silence, making small talk that felt hollow. When they left, they didn't hug or make plans to meet again. They just said goodbye and walked in opposite directions, and Marcus felt like he'd lost something important without ever really having it in the first place. The next week was miserable. Marcus threw himself into work, avoided the break room, and left the office the second 5 o'clock hit. He didn't see Ivy except in passing, once in the parking garage, once near the elevators, and both times they exchanged polite nods that felt like strangers pretending to know each other. Emma noticed the change in his mood. "Are you sad, Daddy?" she asked one night at dinner. "No, sweetheart, just tired." "You're always tired lately." "Work's been busy." Emma frowned, pushing her peas around her plate. "Is it because of the lady?" Marcus's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "What lady?" "The one you were talking to on the phone. I heard you say her name. Ivy." Of course she had. Emma had a habit of being more observant than Marcus gave her credit for. "She's just a friend from work," Marcus said carefully. "Do you like her?" "Sure, she's nice." "But you're not friends anymore?" "Why would you say that?" Emma shrugged. "You seem sad when you talk about her, like when you talk about Mommy sometimes." Marcus set down his fork. "Em, come here." She climbed into his lap, all skinny limbs and wild hair, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her. "I'm not sad about Ivy," he lied. "And Mommy is... that's different." "Okay. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine." Emma tilted her head to look at him. "But if you like her, you should be friends. That's what you always tell me. If someone's nice, you should be nice back." The simple wisdom of a 7-year-old. If only life actually worked that way. "It's complicated, Em." "Because of work?" "Yeah, because of work. Work is dumb." Marcus laughed despite himself. "Sometimes, yeah, it is." Emma hugged him tighter, and Marcus felt the familiar ache of wanting to protect her from a world that was messy and unfair and full of choices that had no good options. The following Monday, everything fell apart. Marcus arrived at work to find an email from HR requesting a meeting at 10 o'clock. No explanation, no context, just a calendar invite with a subject line that read, "Mandatory discussion." His stomach dropped. He spent the next 2 hours trying to work and failing, his mind running through every possible scenario. Had someone filed a complaint? Had the rumors escalated? Was this the beginning of the end? At 9:55, he walked to HR. The department was on the second floor, tucked away in a corner of the building like management wanted to keep it hidden. Marcus checked in with the receptionist, who gave him a sympathetic smile that made his anxiety worse. 5 minutes later, he was sitting across from Janet Torres, the head of HR, and a man he didn't recognize who introduced himself as Marcus's union representative. That's when Marcus knew it was bad. Janet folded her hands on the desk. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming. I'll get straight to the point. We've received a formal complaint regarding your relationship with Ivy Carter." Marcus's blood went cold. "A complaint from who?" "I can't disclose that, but the complaint alleges that you've been engaging in an inappropriate relationship with Ms. Carter, that you've used your position to pressure her into spending time with you, and that this constitutes a violation of company policy regarding workplace conduct." "That's not true. None of that is true. We'll need to investigate, of course. But until the investigation is complete, we're placing you on administrative leave." The words didn't register at first. "What?" "Administrative leave. Paid. You'll return to work once we've completed our inquiry and determined whether any policy violations occurred." Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "How long will that take?" 2 weeks, possibly longer. We'll be conducting interviews with relevant parties, reviewing any communications between you and Ms. Carter, and assessing whether this is insane. I haven't done anything wrong. The union rep put a hand on Marcus's arm. "Let's hear them out." Janet continued, her voice calm and bureaucratic. "We take all complaints seriously, Mr. Hale. This is standard procedure. If the investigation finds no evidence of wrongdoing, you'll be reinstated with no penalty. And if it does find something, then we'll address that at the appropriate time." Marcus sat back in his chair, trying to process. Administrative leave, investigation, formal complaint. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was a threat to his job, his reputation, his ability to provide for Emma. "Can I at least know what I'm being accused of specifically?" he asked. Janet consulted a paper in front of her. "The complaint alleges that you offered Ms. Carter a ride home in exchange for personal contact information, that you initiated multiple social meetings outside of work hours, and that you've created a hostile work environment by pursuing a romantic relationship despite her discomfort." Every word was a distortion of the truth. The ride had been an offer of help, not a transaction. The meetings had been mutual, and Ivy had never expressed discomfort. Quite the opposite. "That's not what happened," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Ivy can tell you that's not what happened. We'll be speaking with Ms. Carter as part of the investigation." "Then talk to her now. Let me confront whoever filed this complaint. Let me—" "That's not how this works, Mr. Hale." The meeting ended shortly after. Marcus was escorted back to his desk to collect his personal items, a humiliation that involved packing up his laptop and files while his coworkers watched from their cubicles with expressions ranging from pity to schadenfreude. Tom Chen caught him in the hallway. "Marcus, I'm sorry, man. If there's anything I can do—" "There's not," Marcus said, not stopping. He drove home in a daze. Administrative leave, investigation. The words kept looping in his head. He'd spent 6 years building a reputation at Caldwell & Associates. 6 years of showing up on time, doing his job well, never causing problems. And now, because he'd given a coworker a ride in the rain and made the mistake of becoming her friend, it was all at risk. He picked up Emma from school early, claiming a doctor's appointment. She was thrilled to leave early, chattering about a science project and a substitute teacher who'd let them have extra recess. Marcus barely heard her. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Marcus sat on his couch with a beer and his phone and tried to figure out what to do next. He should call a lawyer. He should start looking for other jobs, just in case. He should probably warn Ivy about what was coming, though maybe she already knew. Instead, he just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Ivy. They're calling me in tomorrow for an interview. What the hell is going on?" Marcus typed back. "Someone filed a complaint about us. I'm on leave pending investigation." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Who filed it?" "They won't say." "This is insane." "Yeah." A pause, then, "I'm going to tell them the truth. That none of this is what they're saying. Will that matter? It has to." Marcus wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that the truth would be enough, that facts and reality would override rumors and malicious complaints. But he'd been around long enough to know better. The investigation dragged on for 2 weeks that felt like 2 years. Marcus spent his days in a strange limbo. Officially employed but not allowed to work, paid but under suspicion, stuck at home while the rest of the world moved on without him. He filled the time with Emma, took her to the park, helped with homework, made elaborate dinners that neither of them had much appetite for. She asked him once why he wasn't going to work, and he told her he was taking a break. She seemed to accept that, though she kept giving him worried looks when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Ivy texted him updates. She'd given her interview, told them everything exactly as it had happened, emphasized repeatedly that Marcus had never pressured her or made her uncomfortable. The HR investigator had been polite but non-committal, asking questions that seemed designed to catch inconsistencies rather than uncover truth. On day 12, Ivy sent him a longer message. "I found out who filed the complaint. Greg Sutton from Design. Apparently he asked me out 6 months ago, and I turned him down. He's been holding a grudge ever since. Someone told me he saw us having coffee and decided to make it his problem." Marcus read the message 3 times. Greg Sutton. He barely knew the guy. Vaguely remembered him from a project kickoff meeting. Mid-30s, smug smile, the kind of guy who interrupted women in meetings and called it collaboration. And now this stranger had the power to destroy Marcus's career because his ego couldn't handle rejection. "Can we tell HR?" Marcus typed back. "I did. They said it doesn't change the investigation. They still have to follow through." Marcus threw his phone across the couch. On day 14, he got the call. Janet Torres's voice was professionally neutral. "Mr. Hale, the investigation is complete. We'd like you to come in tomorrow at 9 to discuss the findings." "Can you tell me now?" "We'd prefer to do this in person." Marcus barely slept that night. He lay awake running through scenarios, trying to prepare himself for whatever was coming. Termination, demotion, reassignment, a formal reprimand on his permanent record. The next morning, he dropped Emma at school and drove to the office, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Janet was waiting for him, along with the union rep and Claire Davidson. The presence of his boss's boss was either a very good sign or a very bad one. "Mr. Hale," Janet began, "thank you for your patience during this process. After conducting a thorough investigation, interviewing relevant parties, and reviewing all available evidence, we've determined that there was no policy violation. The allegations in the complaint were not substantiated by the facts." Marcus felt like he'd been holding his breath for 2 weeks and could finally exhale. "So I'm clear?" "You're clear. You can return to work immediately. We'll be issuing a formal statement to that effect." Claire leaned forward. "Marcus, I want to apologize. This situation was handled poorly from the start. We should have looked more closely at the source of the complaint before placing you on leave. That's on us." It was the closest thing to an admission of fault he was going to get. "What about Sutton?" Marcus asked. Janet's expression hardened slightly. "Mr. Sutton has been spoken to regarding the filing of false complaints. That's all I can say." Which meant Sutton would get a slap on the wrist, and Marcus would have to work in the same building as the man who'd tried to ruin his life. "Can I make a request?" Marcus said. "Of course. I want to transfer to a different department, different floor, different team. I don't care where. I just don't want to run into Sutton every day." Claire nodded. "We can make that happen." The meeting ended shortly after. Marcus walked back to his car feeling hollowed out. He'd been cleared. He could go back to work. Life could return to normal. Except nothing felt normal anymore. He sat in the parking lot and called Ivy. She answered on the first ring. "Well?" "I'm clear. No violation. Back to work." Thank God. He could hear the relief in her voice. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. Ask me again in a week." "Marcus, I need to see you." he said suddenly. Can you meet me somewhere? When? Now. There was a pause. Yeah, okay. Where? They met at the park near her apartment, the same one Marcus had taken Emma to over the weekend. It was late morning on a Thursday, and the place was mostly empty except for a few joggers and someone walking a dog. Ivy was waiting on a bench by the playground. When she saw Marcus, she stood, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then she closed the distance between them and hugged him. Marcus stood frozen for a second, then wrapped his arms around her, holding on tighter than he probably should have. I'm so sorry, Ivy said into his shoulder. This is my fault. If I hadn't… Stop. It's not your fault. It's Sutton's fault, and the system that believed him over us. They pulled apart but stayed close. Ivy's eyes were red like she'd been crying. I thought they were going to fire you, she said. I thought… They didn't. But they could have. Over nothing. Over a lie. Yeah. They sat down on the bench. The playground equipment cast long shadows across the wood chips. Somewhere nearby, a bird was singing. What happens now? Ivy asked. Marcus had been thinking about that question for 2 weeks. What happened now? What came next? Whether any of this had been worth it. I'm getting transferred, he said. Different department. Fresh start. Oh. Yeah. Does that mean… She stopped, then started again. Does that mean we can't be friends anymore? Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who'd stood by him through an investigation that could have destroyed his career. Who'd told the truth even when lying would have been easier. Who'd texted him every day during his suspension just to make sure he was okay. I don't want to just be your friend, Marcus said. Ivy blinked. What? I don't want to just be your friend, he repeated, the words coming faster now. I've spent 2 weeks on leave, terrified I was going to lose my job and my ability to support my daughter. And you want to know what I kept thinking about? Not the job. Not the investigation. You. I kept thinking about how unfair it was that we were being punished for something that wasn't even happening yet. And how stupid it was that I'd let fear stop me from… He stopped, realizing he was rambling. Ivy was staring at him. From what? From telling you that I like you, more than friends. More than I probably should, considering everything. The words hung in the air between them. You have a daughter, Ivy said quietly. I know. And a complicated life. I know. And I'm younger than you, and we work at the same company, and this could blow up in both our faces. I know all of that. Ivy looked down at her hands. Then why are you telling me this now? Because I almost lost everything over a rumor. And I realized that if I'm going to risk it all, I'd rather it be for something real. She was quiet for a long moment. Marcus's heart was pounding. He'd just laid everything out there. No safety net, no backup plan, no carefully controlled approach that minimized risk. It was the most terrified he'd felt in years. I like you too, Ivy said finally. I have for a while, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make your life more complicated. My life is already complicated. I know, that's why… She looked up at him. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. Marcus thought about Emma, about the schedule that kept their lives stable, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about the last 2 weeks, sitting at home, feeling like he'd lost something before he'd ever really had it. I'm sure, he said. Ivy smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Okay then. Okay? She reached for his hand, and Marcus let her take it, their fingers intertwining in a way that felt both new and inevitable. They sat there on the bench, holding hands in the middle of a park on a Thursday morning, and Marcus felt something shift inside him. The fear was still there. The anxiety about the future, about Emma, about whether this was the right choice. But underneath all of that was something else. Hope. Real hope. The kind that didn't come with guarantees or safety nets or carefully managed expectations. The kind that required faith. What do we do now? Ivy asked. Marcus squeezed her hand. I have to pick up Emma in a few hours. I know. And you have work. I know. But maybe this weekend, if you're free, Emma and I usually go to the farmer's market on Saturday. You could come with us, if you want. Ivy looked at him, something soft in her expression. Are you asking me to meet your daughter? Yeah, I guess I am. That's a big step. I know. But if we're doing this, I want to do it right. And that means Emma being part of it from the start. Ivy nodded slowly. Okay, yeah, I'd like that. They stayed at the park a while longer, talking about logistics and boundaries and how to navigate a relationship that had already survived more scrutiny than most marriages. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was practical and careful and full of all the small negotiations that real relationships required. But it was real. And for Marcus, who'd spent 3 years building a life designed to minimize risk and maximize control, that was enough. When he finally drove home to pick up Emma, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. The investigation was over. He'd been cleared. And he'd taken a leap he'd been too scared to take before. He didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if this thing with Ivy would last or crash and burn or require more navigation than either of them was prepared for. But for the first time in a long time, he was willing to find out. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky Portland specialized in. Not quite raining, not quite clear, just perpetually undecided. Marcus woke up at 5:47 out of habit, stared at the ceiling for 20 minutes, running through every possible disaster scenario, then gave up on sleep entirely. Emma found him in the kitchen at 6:30, already on his second cup of coffee. "You're up early," she said, climbing onto a stool at the counter. "Couldn't sleep." "Because of the farmer's market?" "Something like that." Emma studied him with the unsettling perception kids sometimes had. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "Because of Ivy?" Marcus had told Emma yesterday that his friend from work would be joining them at the market. He tried to keep it casual, like it was no big deal, just someone tagging along. Emma had asked exactly 3 questions. Is she nice? Does she like strawberries? And can I wear my unicorn shirt? Then moved on to discussing whether pandas were better than penguins. 7-year-olds had priorities that made more sense than adult ones. "Yeah," Marcus admitted. "Because of Ivy." "Why?" "You said she's nice." "She is." "Then why are you nervous?" How did you explain to a 7-year-old that introducing someone new into their life felt like standing at the edge of a cliff? That it meant things were real in a way they hadn't been before? That it carried the possibility of Emma getting attached to someone who might not stay? "I just want you two to get along," Marcus said, which was true, but incomplete. Emma shrugged. "Okay, can we have pancakes?" They could have pancakes. Ivy arrived at 9 o'clock on the dot, which Marcus appreciated because it meant she understood punctuality mattered when a 7-year-old was involved. She was wearing jeans and a green sweater, her hair down for once instead of pulled back, and she looked nervous in a way that made Marcus feel slightly better about his own anxiety. "Hi," she said, when Marcus opened the door. "Hi." They stood there for a second, suddenly awkward, until Emma appeared behind Marcus and solved the problem by being a kid with no concept of social tension. "Are you Ivy?" she asked. "I am. You must be Emma." "Yep. Do you like strawberries?" Ivy blinked, clearly not expecting that to be the opening question. "I do, yeah." "Good. They have the best strawberries at the market. Daddy always gets 2 baskets, but I think we should get 3 because we eat them really fast." "3 sounds like a good plan." Emma nodded, satisfied, then looked up at Marcus. "Can we go now? I want to get there before they run out of the cinnamon rolls." The farmer's market was a 20-minute drive to the waterfront, a sprawling collection of stalls and tents that sold everything from organic vegetables to handmade soap to questionable art pieces made from driftwood. Marcus and Emma had been coming here almost every Saturday for 2 years. It was part of the routine, one of the few weekend rituals Emma looked forward to. Bringing Ivy felt like introducing a foreign element into a stable ecosystem. Marcus wasn't sure how the system would adapt. The first 15 minutes went fine. They walked through the produce section, Emma pointing out her favorite vendors, Ivy asking questions that seemed genuinely interested rather than just polite. They bought strawberries, 3 baskets, as Emma had insisted, and some heirloom tomatoes that Marcus had no idea what to do with but bought anyway because the farmer looked hopeful. Then they reached the bakery stall, and things got complicated. The woman running it was Linda Chen, Tom's wife, and someone Marcus had chatted with dozens of times over the past 2 years. She knew Emma, knew Marcus was a single dad, knew more about his life than most people at the office because small talk at a farmer's market had a way of becoming real conversation over time. Linda's eyes widened slightly when she saw Ivy standing next to Marcus. Well, she said, her smile a little too bright. Marcus? Emma. And I don't think we've met. Ivy? Ivy said, extending a hand. Nice to meet you. Linda, I'm married to Tom. He works with Marcus. She was still smiling, but Marcus could see her brain working, making connections, probably already planning what to tell Tom the second they got home. 2 cinnamon rolls, Marcus said, trying to move things along. Make it 3, Emma said. Ivy should have one too. 3 it is, Linda said, bagging them up, while sneaking glances at Ivy like she was a puzzle to solve. They paid and moved on, but Marcus could feel Linda's eyes following them through the crowd. That was weird, Ivy said quietly, once they were out of earshot. Yeah. Is everyone going to stare at us like that? Probably. Ivy was quiet for a moment. Does that bother you? It did. Marcus hated the attention, hated feeling like his life was being observed and judged by people who didn't know the whole story. But what bothered him more was the idea of letting other people's opinions dictate his choices. It bothers me less than the alternative, he said. Ivy smiled slightly. What's the alternative? Not bringing you here. Emma had run ahead to look at a display of handmade kaleidoscopes, giving them a rare moment of semi-privacy in the crowded market. She's great, by the way, Ivy said, nodding toward Emma. Your daughter, she's really great. Thanks. She has her moments. Does she know? About us? Not yet. I wanted her to meet you first, get comfortable. Then we can, I don't know, figure out how to explain it. Ivy nodded. That makes sense. No rush. They caught up to Emma, who'd convinced herself she needed a kaleidoscope despite having received one for her birthday 3 months ago. Marcus negotiated her down to looking through all of them and picking a favorite, which she could ask for at Christmas. Emma accepted this compromise with the resignation of someone who knew the game and chose to play anyway. The rest of the market visit went smoother. They bought fresh bread, some local honey, a bouquet of flowers that Emma insisted on carrying even though it was almost as big as she was. Ivy fit into the rhythm of it more easily than Marcus had expected. She didn't try too hard, didn't force conversation, just existed alongside them in a way that felt natural. At one point, Emma grabbed Ivy's hand to drag her over to a stall selling handmade jewelry, and Marcus felt something catch in his chest. It was such a small gesture, so casual, but it meant Emma was comfortable, meant she was letting Ivy in. That terrified and relieved him in equal measure. They stopped for lunch at a taco truck Emma loved, sitting at a picnic table near the river. Emma dominated the conversation, telling Ivy about school and her best friend Zoe and the hamster their class was taking care of that kept escaping its cage. His name is Houdini, Emma said seriously, because he's an escape artist. That's a perfect name? Ivy said. I know. I came up with it. Marcus caught Ivy's eye across the table, and she smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made her whole face light up. Marcus smiled back, and for a moment, sitting at a picnic table eating mediocre tacos with his daughter and the woman he was maybe falling for, everything felt okay. Then Emma said, Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Marcus choked on his drink. Ivy's eyes went wide. Emma, Marcus started. What? I'm just asking. Emma looked between them with the blunt curiosity of a kid who hadn't yet learned that some questions were supposed to stay unasked. Ivy recovered first. Would it bother you if I was? Emma considered this, tilting her head. I don't know. Zoe's mom has a boyfriend, and he's kind of annoying. He talks really loud and thinks he's funny, but he's not. I promise not to talk really loud or think I'm funny, Ivy said. Okay, then I guess it's fine. Emma took a bite of her taco, the matter apparently settled in her mind. Marcus and Ivy exchanged a look that contained about 17 different emotions. Well, Marcus said, that went better than expected. Did it? Ivy asked. She didn't run away screaming, so yeah. Emma rolled her eyes. Why would I run away screaming? That's weird. You're right, Em, that would be weird. They finished lunch and headed back to the car, Emma skipping ahead with her flowers, while Marcus and Ivy walked a few steps behind. So, Ivy said quietly. I'm your girlfriend now? Is that what we're calling this? Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. I mean, we don't have to. If you don't want. Marcus. He looked at her. I want to, she said. Just checking if you do too. Yeah, I do. Okay then. She reached for his hand and Marcus let her take it, very aware that they were in public and people could see, and some of those people might know him or work at Caldwell or have opinions about what a 32-year-old single father should or shouldn't be doing with his personal life. He squeezed her hand anyway. The following week at work was an exercise in boundary management. Marcus had been transferred to the infrastructure planning department, a smaller team on the third floor that dealt mostly with long-term development projects. It meant new coworkers, new projects, new office politics to navigate. But it also meant distance from Sutton and the design department and the people who'd made his life hell for 2 weeks. Ivy was still up on 5. They'd agreed to keep things professional at the office. No public displays of affection, no lunch dates in the cafeteria, nothing that would give the rumor mill fresh ammunition. It was harder than Marcus expected. He'd catch glimpses of her in the hallway or the parking garage and have to resist the urge to stop and talk, to close the distance between them, to act like they did outside of work. They made up for it in other ways. Dinner at Ivy's apartment on Tuesday, where Marcus brought takeout, and they ate on her couch while watching a documentary about architecture that was somehow both boring and fascinating. Coffee on Wednesday morning before work, meeting at a place far enough from the office that they wouldn't run into colleagues. A phone call Thursday night after Emma went to bed, talking about nothing important until Ivy fell asleep mid-sentence and Marcus stayed on the line, just listening to her breathe. It felt like being a teenager again, except with more emotional complexity and adult responsibilities. On Friday, Marcus got a call from Emma's school. The number came up on his phone at 2:30, right in the middle of a meeting about drainage systems for a proposed housing development. Marcus excused himself, his stomach already tight with worry. "Mr. Hale? This is Principal Morrison from Riverside Elementary." Marcus's pulse spiked. "Is Emma okay?" "She's fine, but we had an incident during recess today. Emma got into an altercation with another student." Altercation. The word hung in the air like a grenade. What kind of altercation? There was pushing involved and some unkind words. "We've separated the children and they're both in my office now. I think it would be good if you could come in." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus left work immediately, texting his new boss a vague excuse about a family emergency. The drive to Riverside felt like it took an hour, even though it was only 15 minutes. Emma didn't get into fights. She was a good kid, a rule follower, someone who preferred books to confrontation. Something had happened. Something bad enough to warrant a call from the principal. When Marcus arrived, he was directed to Morrison's office. Emma was sitting in a chair outside, her face red and blotchy like she'd been crying. When she saw Marcus, her expression crumpled. "Daddy." "Hey, sweetheart. Are you okay?" She nodded, but fresh tears started sliding down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. We'll talk about it. Just give me a minute with Principal Morrison first, okay?" Emma nodded again, wiping her face with her sleeve. Inside the office, Marcus found Principal Morrison, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and the patient expression of someone who'd seen every possible variation of child behavior, sitting behind her desk. Across from her was another parent, a man Marcus vaguely recognized from school pickup. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming," Morrison said. "This is Mr. Brennan. His son Tyler is the other student involved." Brennan nodded curtly. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "What happened?" Marcus asked. Morrison folded her hands. According to the playground monitor, Tyler made some comments about Emma's family situation. Emma responded by pushing him. Tyler pushed back. Things escalated from there. "Comments about her family situation," Marcus repeated slowly. "What kind of comments?" Morrison glanced at Brennan, who shifted in his seat. "Tyler said something about Emma not having a mother. It wasn't appropriate, and we've spoken to him about it." Marcus felt anger spike hot in his chest. He was making fun of her for being raised by a single parent? "Kids can be cruel," Brennan said, which was possibly the worst non-apology Marcus had ever heard. "But your daughter shouldn't have pushed him. Your son was bullying her." "He made a comment. That's not bullying. It is when it's designed to hurt her." Morrison held up a hand. "Gentlemen, let's stay focused. The point is that physical altercations aren't acceptable, regardless of what preceded them. Both children will be receiving consequences." "What consequences?" Marcus asked. "Emma will have in-school suspension for Monday. Tyler as well." Marcus wanted to argue. wanted to point out that his daughter had been defending herself, that punishing her for responding to bullying was backwards and unfair. But he also knew that fighting with the principal wouldn't help Emma. "Fine," he said tightly. "Anything else?" "We'd like both children to write apology letters to each other. And Mr. Hale, if Emma is dealing with difficult emotions about her family situation, we have a counselor available who she can talk to." The implication being that Emma's outburst was a symptom of deeper issues, which maybe it was, but it didn't make the assumption sting any less. "I'll talk to her," Marcus said. The meeting ended shortly after. Marcus collected Emma from the hallway, and they walked to the car in silence. She climbed into her booster seat without a word, her face still red and splotchy. Marcus sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the car. Can you tell me what happened?" She stared at her lap. "Tyler said I don't have a real family because I don't have a mom. He said it's weird and sad. And I told him to shut up and he said he wouldn't, and I pushed him." "Okay. I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to push people." "You're not. But I understand why you did." Emma looked up at him, surprised. "You're not mad?" "I'm mad at Tyler. And I'm sad that he said something that hurt you, but I'm not mad at you for standing up for yourself. Principal Morrison said I have to write an apology letter." "Yeah, you do, because pushing wasn't the right way to handle it, but that doesn't mean your feelings weren't valid." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Do I have a real family?" Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "Of course you do. We're a family, you and me. But it's not like other families. Zoe has a mom and a dad. Tyler has a mom and a dad and a baby sister. I just have you. Is that not enough?" "I don't know." Emma's voice was small, uncertain. "Sometimes I wish I had a mom. Not her, not the one who left, but like someone who was here." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. It was a wish he couldn't grant, a hole in their life that he'd tried for 3 years to fill by being both parents at once, and clearly he'd been failing. "I'm sorry, Em," he said quietly. "I know our family is different. I know that's hard sometimes." "It's okay. I'm used to it," which was possibly the saddest thing she'd ever said. They drove home in silence. Marcus made macaroni and cheese for dinner because comfort food felt appropriate, and they ate in the living room watching a movie Emma had seen 17 times. She fell asleep on the couch halfway through, and Marcus carried her to bed, tucking her in with the gentleness of someone handling something infinitely precious and fragile. Then he sat on his own bed and called Ivy. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, how was your day?" "Complicated." Marcus told her about the school incident, about Tyler's comments and Emma's reaction and the suspension and the question about real families. Ivy was quiet for a moment after he finished. "That's rough." "Yeah. How's Emma doing now?" "Asleep. But I don't think she's okay. I don't think she's been okay for a while, and I've been too busy keeping everything running to notice." "Marcus, you're doing your best." "My best isn't enough." "She's right. We're not a normal family. We're just two people trying to pretend we are." "You're not pretending. You're surviving. There's a difference." Marcus rubbed his eyes. "I don't know anymore. Some days I feel like I'm doing okay, like we're going to make it through. Other days I feel like I'm failing her in ways I won't understand until she's in therapy 15 years from now, talking about how her dad couldn't give her a stable home. You give her a stable home. You give her love and attention and support. That's not failing. Then why does it feel like it?" Ivy didn't have an answer for that. Neither did Marcus. They talked for a while longer about nothing and everything until Marcus felt some of the tension drain out of his shoulders. Eventually, Ivy said she should let him get some sleep, and Marcus agreed even though he knew sleep wasn't happening anytime soon. "Hey," Ivy said before hanging up. "For what it's worth, I think you're a good dad. Emma's lucky to have you." "Thanks. That means a lot." "I mean it." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the dark of his bedroom and thought about families and what made them real. He thought about Emma's question, about Tyler's cruelty, about the fact that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't protect his daughter from a world that judged her circumstances as less than. He thought about Ivy and the way she'd fit so easily into their Saturday morning routine, about the way Emma had grabbed her hand without hesitation, about the possibility that maybe their family wasn't incomplete. Maybe it was just evolving. But evolution required risk required letting go of the controlled, predictable life Marcus had built and accepting something messier and more uncertain. And Marcus wasn't sure he was brave enough for that. The weekend passed quietly. Emma served her suspension on Monday with a mix of embarrassment and defiance. She wrote her apology letter to Tyler, a single paragraph that was technically polite but clearly lacked sincerity, and Marcus didn't push her to rewrite it. Tuesday, she went back to school and life resumed its normal rhythm. Except things didn't feel normal. Marcus couldn't shake the conversation in the car, couldn't stop hearing Emma say, "Sometimes I wish I had a mom," in that small, sad voice. On Wednesday, he texted Ivy, "Can we talk? In person?" She suggested meeting at her apartment after Emma's bedtime. Marcus dropped Emma at Mrs. Patterson's for the evening, a rare midweek babysitting request that earned him a knowing look he chose to ignore, and drove to Ivy's place. She answered the door in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, her hair piled on top of her head in a messy bun. "You look stressed," she said by way of greeting. "I am stressed. Come in. I made tea, or I can make it something stronger if you want." "Tea's fine." They sat on her couch, mugs of chamomile in hand, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I've been thinking," Marcus said finally, "about us, about Emma, about how to make this work." "Okay." "And I realized I'm terrified." Ivy set down her mug. "Of what?" "Of screwing this up. Of Emma getting attached to you and then you deciding this is too much and leaving. Of her getting hurt because I made a selfish choice to let someone into our lives. That's a lot of fear." "Yeah." "Do you trust me?" Ivy asked. Marcus looked at her. "Yes." "Then trust that I'm not going anywhere. Trust that I know what I'm getting into. Trust that I care about Emma and I care about you and I'm willing to do the work to make this last." What if it's not enough? What if it is? Marcus wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that love and effort and good intentions were enough to overcome the mess of reality. But he'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. "Emma asked me if we were a real family," he said quietly. "And I didn't know how to answer. Because we are. Of course we are. But we're also missing something. And I've been trying to be enough for her, trying to fill that gap, but I can't. I'm just one person." Ivy reached for his hand. "You're not one person anymore. Not if you don't want to be." "Ivy, I'm not saying I'm her mother. I'm not trying to replace anyone or force myself into a role I haven't earned. But I'm here, and I want to be here. For both of you. If you'll let me." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. This is scary. "I know. What if we fail? What if we don't?" It was the same question, flipped around. What if instead of planning for disaster, they planned for success? What if instead of protecting themselves from pain, they opened themselves to possibility? Marcus had spent 3 years building walls. Maybe it was time to consider doors. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay. Let's do this. For real. No more hedging or holding back. Let's see where this goes." Ivy's smile was bright enough to light the room. "Yeah? Yeah." She kissed him then, soft and brief and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Marcus felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. They spent the rest of the evening talking about logistics, about how to integrate Ivy more fully into their lives without overwhelming Emma, about boundaries and expectations and how to navigate the relationship in a way that worked for all three of them. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was practical and slightly awkward and exactly what they needed. When Marcus left, driving home through the dark Portland streets, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not certainty. He'd never have that. But hope. Real hope. The kind built on honesty and trust and the willingness to try. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Patterson's apartment, carrying her sleeping form back to their own place and tucking her into bed. She stirred as he pulled the blanket up. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "Is Ivy coming to my birthday party?" Emma's birthday was 3 weeks away. Marcus had been planning a small party at the house. Just a few kids from school, pizza, cake, the standard 7-year-old celebration. "Do you want her to come?" he asked. Emma nodded against her pillow. "She's nice, and she likes strawberries." Marcus smiled. "Then yeah, she can come." "Good." Emma's eyes were already closing again. "I like her, Daddy." "Me too, Em." "She going to stay?" It was the question Marcus had been asking himself, the one without guarantees or easy answers. I hope so, he said honestly. Emma smiled slightly. Okay. She fell back asleep, and Marcus stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe in the dim glow of her nightlight. He'd spent 3 years trying to give Emma stability, trying to be enough, trying to build a life that worked despite its imperfections. Maybe it was time to stop trying to be enough on his own. Maybe it was time to accept help, to let someone else in, to believe that their small, imperfect family could grow into something bigger without falling apart. It was a risk. Everything was a risk. But standing there in the doorway, thinking about Ivy's smile and Emma's question and the possibility of a future that included all three of them, Marcus realized he was ready to take it. Emma's birthday party was chaos in the best possible way. 8 7-year-olds hopped up on pizza and fruit punch turned Marcus's living room into something resembling a small tornado. There were streamers everywhere, a pile of presents in the corner that Emma kept eyeing like a dragon guarding treasure, and enough noise to make Marcus's ears ring. But Emma was laughing, really laughing, in a way she hadn't in months, and that made the chaos worth it. Ivy had arrived early to help set up, which meant she'd been there when the first kid showed up 45 minutes ahead of schedule because his parents had misread the invitation. She'd handled it without flinching, entertaining the kid with a drawing game while Marcus finished frosting the cake and questioning every life choice that had led to him attempting to frost a cake shaped like a unicorn. "It's lopsided," Marcus had said, staring at his creation with dismay. "It's perfect," Ivy had replied, which was a lie, but he appreciated it anyway. Now, 3 hours into the party, Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway watching Ivy organize a game of musical chairs while Emma and her friends shrieked with laughter. She looked completely at ease, like she'd been doing this for years instead of weeks, like she belonged here. "She's good with kids," Mrs. Patterson said from beside him. She'd stopped by to drop off a birthday card for Emma and had stayed to help supervise, which mostly meant standing next to Marcus and offering commentary. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "You holding on to this one?" Marcus glanced at her. Mrs. Patterson was 73 and had lived in the building since before Marcus moved in. She'd babysat Emma dozens of times, knew more about their lives than most family members, and had exactly zero filter. "Planning on it," Marcus said. "Good. You need someone. Emma needs someone. This whole lone wolf thing you've been doing is admirable but exhausting to watch." "I wasn't trying to be a lone wolf. I was trying to be stable. Stability doesn't mean doing everything alone. Took you long enough to figure that out." She patted his arm and wandered off to get more punch, leaving Marcus with that observation sitting heavy in his chest. The party wound down around 4 o'clock. Parents arrived to collect their sugar-crashed children, each one thanking Marcus for hosting while shooting curious glances at Ivy. He could see the questions forming. Who is she? How serious is this? Does Emma call her mom yet? But no one asked directly, and Marcus was grateful for small mercies. By 4:30, the apartment was empty except for Marcus, Emma, and Ivy. Emma was sprawled on the couch, surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys, looking simultaneously exhausted and elated. "Best birthday ever," she declared. "Better than last year?" Marcus asked. Last year had involved a trip to the zoo and an unfortunate incident with a peacock that Emma still brought up regularly. "Way better. No birds attacking me." "That peacock was not attacking you, it was just standing there. It looked at me mean." Ivy laughed from where she was collecting paper plates. "What do mean birds look like?" "Like they're planning something bad." "Fair assessment of peacocks, honestly." Emma grinned, then looked at Marcus. "Can Ivy stay for cake? We didn't cut the cake yet because Zoe's mom had to leave early." "If Ivy wants to stay," Marcus said, looking at her. "I want to stay," Ivy said without hesitation. They ate unicorn cakes at the kitchen table. Emma had been right. It was lopsided, but it tasted fine. And Emma talked nonstop about her favorite presents and which friends had been the loudest and whether 8-year-old birthdays would be even better or if 7 was the peak. "I think each year gets better," Ivy said. "When I turned 8, my parents took me to the aquarium and I got to touch a stingray." "That's so cool. Can we go to the aquarium, Daddy?" "Sure, Em. We can plan a trip. Can Ivy come?" Marcus met Ivy's eyes across the table. "If she wants to." "I want to," Ivy said again, and Emma beamed. "After cake, Emma started organizing her new toys with the intense focus of a military strategist planning a campaign. Marcus and Ivy retreated to the kitchen under the guise of cleaning up, though mostly they just stood next to each other at the sink, not quite touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. "Thank you for today," Marcus said quietly. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to. She's a great kid, and—" Ivy paused, choosing her words carefully. "I like being here, with both of you. It feels right." "Yeah, it does." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, then joined Emma in the living room. She was building an elaborate structure with some kind of magnetic tile set, narrating the entire process to herself. "This is the tower," she was saying, "and this is where the princess lives. But she's not a regular princess, she's a scientist princess who studies dragons." "Scientist princess," Ivy said, sitting down on the floor next to her. "That's a good combination." "I know, she's really smart and also brave. Can you hand me the blue triangle?" They spent the next hour building a castle together, Emma directing the construction with the authority of an architect who knew exactly what she wanted. Marcus watched from the couch, his chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to complete happiness. This was what he'd been afraid of. This moment, right here, the three of them together, easy and natural, like they'd always been this way. It was everything he wanted and everything that scared him, because wanting something this much meant it could hurt that much worse if it fell apart. But watching Emma laugh as Ivy pretended to be a dragon attacking the castle, Marcus realized something. Fear of loss had been driving his decisions for 3 years. Fear of Emma getting hurt, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of letting anyone close enough to matter. And that fear had kept them safe, maybe. But it had also kept them small. Maybe it was time to choose something bigger than fear. Around 7 o'clock, Emma started yawning despite her best efforts to stay awake. The party crash was setting in hard. "Bedtime, kiddo," Marcus said. "But I'm not tired." "Your yawns say otherwise." Emma looked at Ivy. "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" "Not tomorrow, but I'll see you soon." "Okay, will you come to my school play? It's in 2 weeks. I'm playing a tree." "A tree?" Ivy's lips twitched. "That's an important role." "I know, I have 3 lines." "Then I definitely have to be there." Emma hugged Ivy goodnight, quick and unself-conscious, the way kids hugged people they trusted, then let Marcus carry her to her room. He got her into pajamas and through teeth brushing with the efficiency of long practice, then tucked her into bed with her current favorite stuffed animal, a dragon named Steve. "Daddy?" Emma said as he was turning off the light. "Yeah, sweetheart? I really like Ivy." "I'm glad. Is she going to be like a mom?" Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed. This was the conversation he'd been dreading and knowing was inevitable. "What do you mean? Like, is she going to live here and be part of our family forever?" "I don't know about forever, Em. That's a big word, but I hope she'll be part of our lives for a long time." Emma was quiet, processing. "Tyler was wrong, wasn't he? About us not being a real family?" "Yeah, buddy, he was wrong. Because families can be different sizes and different shapes, and it doesn't matter as long as people love each other?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. Exactly that. "So we're a real family, you and me, and maybe Ivy too, if she stays." "Yeah, we are." "Okay." Emma yawned again. "I'm glad. I like our family." "Me too, Em." She was asleep before Marcus made it to the door. When he returned to the living room, Ivy was putting the last of the toys in a corner, trying to restore some semblance of order to the chaos. She looked up when he entered. "She okay?" "Yeah." "Asked if you were going to be like a mom." Ivy's eyes widened. "What did you say?" "That I hoped you'd be part of our lives for a long time." Marcus crossed to where she stood. "Was that okay? I know we haven't really talked about the future in concrete terms." "It's more than okay." Ivy set down the toy she was holding. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you, both of you. And I know that's scary and complicated and there are no guarantees, but it's true. And I'm tired of being careful about it." Marcus stared at her. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "I'm falling in love with you too," he said. "Have been for a while. I was just too scared to admit it." "And now?" "Now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of not trying." Ivy smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. She closed the distance between them, and Marcus pulled her close, holding her tight enough to feel her heartbeat against his chest. "This is really happening," she said against his shoulder. "Yeah, it is." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other in the middle of Marcus's living room, still covered in birthday party debris, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like peace. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Ivy started spending more time at the apartment, dinner a few nights a week, weekend mornings at the farmer's market, the school play where she sat next to Marcus and watched Emma stand completely still as a tree while delivering her 3 lines with the gravitas of a Shakespearean actor. She kept her own place, maintaining that boundary of independence, but the space between their lives was shrinking in ways that felt natural rather than forced. Work stabilized. The transfer to infrastructure planning turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The team was smaller, the projects more interesting, and nobody cared about Marcus's personal life as long as he met his deadlines. He ran into Sutton once in the parking garage and felt absolutely nothing, which seemed like progress. Ivy got promoted to senior designer, a recognition that was 3 years overdue and came with a raise that made her cry happy tears in Marcus's car during lunch. They celebrated with cheap champagne and expensive sushi, toasting to success and survival and the fact that they'd both made it through the worst parts and come out intact. Emma thrived. The incident with Tyler faded into background noise, replaced by new friendships and new interests and a slowly building confidence that Marcus could see in the way she carried herself. She still had hard days, days where she missed having a mom, days where the differences in her family felt too big to ignore. But she also had Ivy, who showed up consistently and cared genuinely and never tried to be something she wasn't. One Saturday in late November, they drove to the coast. Emma had been asking to see the ocean for months, and Marcus finally had a free weekend with weather that didn't look actively hostile. They left early, the sky still dark, and drove through forests that gradually gave way to scrubby beach grass and dunes. Emma fell asleep in the back seat halfway through the drive. Ivy was in the passenger seat, her hand resting on Marcus's knee, both of them quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. "Can I ask you something?" Ivy said softly. "Sure." "Are you happy?" Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the question. "Yeah, I am. Why?" "I just wanted to make sure. You spent so long in survival mode, I wasn't sure if you knew how to recognize happiness when you had it." Marcus thought about that. She was right. He'd spent 3 years focused on stability, on maintaining routines, on keeping everything controlled and predictable. Happiness hadn't been the goal. Survival had. But somewhere along the way, survival had become life. And life had become something worth celebrating. "I'm happy," he said again, more certain this time. "Happier than I've been in years. Maybe ever." Ivy squeezed his knee. "Good. You deserve it. So do you." "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think maybe we both do." They reached the coast just as the sun was rising. The beach was empty except for a few early morning joggers and someone walking a dog. Marcus parked and they woke Emma gently, bundling her into her jacket before heading down to the sand. The ocean was exactly as Emma had imagined it, vast and gray and loud, waves crashing against the shore with relentless rhythm. She ran toward the water, shrieking when the cold spray hit her face, then ran back laughing. "It's freezing!" she yelled. "It's the Pacific Ocean in November," Marcus called back. "What did you expect?" "I don't know, warmer." They walked along the beach, Emma running ahead to examine tide pools and interesting rocks while Marcus and Ivy followed at a slower pace. The wind was sharp, carrying the salt smell of the sea, and the sand was cold and damp under their feet. "This is nice," Ivy said. "Yeah. We should do this more often, get out of the city, do things as a family." Family. The word still carried weight, but it didn't feel scary anymore. It felt right. "I'd like that," Marcus said. They found a spot sheltered by some driftwood and sat down, watching Emma chase seagulls with the single-minded determination of someone who genuinely believed she might catch one. The sun was fully up now, pale and watery, but present. "Marcus?" Ivy said after a while. "Yeah?" "Move in with me." Marcus turned to look at her. "What? Move in with me?" "You and Emma. My apartment is bigger than yours and it's closer to her school and..." Ivy paused, then smiled. And I want you there. I want to wake up with you every morning and have dinner together every night and build a life that's ours, all three of us. Marcus's heart was pounding again. This was big. Bigger than dating, bigger than weekend visits, bigger than anything they'd done so far. This was commitment. This was permanence. This was choosing to build something together instead of maintaining separate lives that occasionally overlapped. This was terrifying. What about Emma? He asked. That's a big change for her. So ask her, see what she thinks. And if she says no, then we wait until she's ready. Ivy took his hand. I'm not going anywhere, Marcus. Whether you move in next month or next year or never, but I wanted you to know that I want this. I want us. Fully, completely. No more half measures. Marcus looked at her. At this woman who'd appeared in his life during a rainstorm and refused to leave even when things got hard. Who'd stood by him through investigations and rumors and all the messy reality of dating a single father. Who made Emma laugh and made Marcus believe that happiness was possible. Yeah, he said. Okay, let's ask her. They called Emma over. She came running, breathless and sandy, holding a shell she'd found that was allegedly the most perfect shell in the history of shells. Look, she said, shoving it toward them. That's beautiful, Em, Marcus said. Can you sit with us for a second? We want to talk to you about something. Emma sat down between them, still clutching her shell. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, nothing like that. Ivy has a question for you. Ivy took a breath. Emma, how would you feel about moving to my apartment? All three of us living together? Emma's eyes went wide. Like, for real? Not just visiting? For real. Would I get my own room? Yeah, there's a room that would be just yours. You could decorate it however you want. Emma looked at Marcus. Is this okay with you, Daddy? It's more than okay, but only if it's okay with you. Emma was quiet for a moment, her expression serious. Then she said, Would we still go to the farmer's market on Saturdays? Of course, Ivy said. And I'd still go to the same school? Same school. It's actually closer to my apartment, so you could sleep in a little later. And you'd be there? Like, every day? Every day. Emma nodded slowly, processing. Then she looked up at both of them. Tyler said I don't have a real family, but if we all live together, that means we're definitely a real family, right? Marcus felt his chest tighten. We're already a real family, Em. Living together just means we'll be together more. But like a regular family with a mom and a dad and a kid? Ivy spoke carefully. I'm not trying to replace your biological mom, Emma, but I'd like to be someone you can count on, someone who's there for you, if that's okay with you. Emma thought about this. Like a bonus mom? Yeah, like a bonus mom. Okay. Emma looked between them. Then, yeah, I want to live together as long as I can bring Steve. Marcus laughed despite the tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. Steve the dragon can definitely come. Then it's decided. Emma stood up, ready to return to her seagull chasing. Can I tell Zoe we're moving? She's going to be so jealous that I get a bonus mom. Sure, Em, you can tell Zoe. Emma ran off again, and Marcus and Ivy sat there on the cold sand watching her go. A bonus mom, Ivy said, her voice thick. I like that. Yeah, Marcus said. Me too. They sat there a while longer, watching the waves and Emma and the sun slowly climbing higher in the gray sky. Marcus thought about the last 3 years, about everything he'd built and everything he'd been afraid to risk, about the night he'd given Ivy a ride in the rain and how impossible it seemed that such a small gesture could lead to this moment right here. Life didn't follow plans. It didn't respect carefully maintained boundaries or risk-averse strategies. It just happened, messy and unpredictable and occasionally terrifying. And somewhere along the way, if you were lucky, it gave you people worth fighting for. Marcus had spent so long trying to control everything, trying to protect Emma from a world that had already hurt her once. But maybe protection wasn't about building walls. Maybe it was about building a life big enough and strong enough to weather whatever came next. Maybe it was about choosing love even when love meant risk. They moved in 3 weeks later. The process was chaotic, packing up an apartment worth of accumulated belongings, coordinating movers, explaining to Emma for the 17th time that yes, Steve the Dragon was definitely coming and no, they would not forget him. Mrs. Patterson cried when they said goodbye. making them promise to visit regularly and call if they needed anything. Ivy's apartment became their apartment. Emma's new room got painted purple at her insistence, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Marcus spent 2 hours carefully arranging. They hung Emma's drawings on the fridge and stocked the pantry with the specific brand of mac and cheese she liked, and slowly merged their lives into something that felt cohesive rather than cobbled together. It wasn't perfect. There were adjustment periods and arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes, and moments when Emma got overwhelmed by the changes and needed reassurance that this was permanent, that Ivy wasn't leaving, that their family was real. But it worked. Messy and imperfect, and sometimes exhausting, but real. And real was better than perfect any day. 6 months after they moved in, on another rainy evening that reminded Marcus of the night everything started, he stood by the window in their living room and watched the water stream down the glass. Emma was at the table doing homework with Ivy supervising, the two of them debating whether penguins could fly if they really wanted to, or if physics made it impossible. Physics makes it impossible, Ivy was saying. But what if they tried really hard? Emma countered. Trying hard doesn't change physics. It should. Marcus smiled, listening to them. This was his life now. Not the controlled, predictable existence he'd built 3 years ago, but something bigger and messier and infinitely better. A life that included laughter and debate, and someone to share the weight when it got too heavy to carry alone. Ivy looked up and caught him watching. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just that I'm glad I gave you a ride that night." "The night my car died?" "Yeah." Emma looked up from her homework. "Is that how you met Ivy? Her car broke?" "That's how we met," Marcus confirmed. "What would have happened if you didn't give her a ride?" "I don't know, Em. I guess we might never have become friends." "That would be sad," Emma said seriously, "because then we wouldn't be a family." "Yeah," Marcus said. "That would be sad." Emma nodded, satisfied with this logic, and returned to her homework. Ivy came over to where Marcus stood, sliding her arms around his waist and resting her head against his shoulder. "No regrets?" she asked quietly. "Not even one. Not even the investigation, the rumors, the stress? Especially not those. They showed me what matters." "And what matters?" Marcus looked at Emma, bent over her math problems with her tongue sticking out in concentration. He looked at Ivy, solid and warm beside him. He looked at the rain falling outside, steady and relentless and somehow beautiful. "This," he said, "right here. This matters." And standing there in their home, not his apartment or her apartment, but their home, with the rain falling and dinner in the oven and Emma asking physics questions that had no easy answers, Marcus realized something. He'd spent 3 years after Sarah left believing that safety came from control. That if he could just manage every variable, anticipate every risk, maintain perfect routines, then nothing bad could happen. Emma would be protected. He would be protected. They'd survive. But survival wasn't the same as living. Living meant taking risks, meant letting people in even when they could hurt you, meant building something beautiful even knowing it could fall apart, meant choosing hope over fear, love over safety, possibility over protection. It meant accepting that you couldn't control everything, but you could choose who you faced the chaos with. Marcus had chosen Ivy. Emma had chosen Ivy. And Ivy had chosen them, knowing full well what she was signing up for. The complications and the baggage and the reality that dating a single father meant inheriting his entire life, not just the parts that were convenient. She'd chosen them anyway. And that, Marcus thought, was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version where everything was easy and perfect, but the messy, complicated, everyday kind of love that showed up when things got hard and stayed when staying was difficult. The kind of love that built families out of broken pieces and made them whole again. Emma finished her homework around 7. They had dinner together, pasta with the tomatoes from the farmer's market that Marcus had finally figured out what to do with. And Emma told them about her day in exhaustive detail, including a full report on the current drama between Zoe and another girl named Madison, who'd allegedly stolen Zoe's favorite pencil. After dinner, they watched a movie together, the three of them piled on the couch with blankets and popcorn. Emma fell asleep halfway through, curled up between Marcus and Ivy, her head on Marcus's lap and her feet in Ivy's. "Should we move her to bed?" Ivy whispered. "In a minute. I want to enjoy this a little longer." They sat there in the dim light of the television, the movie playing to an audience of 2.5. And Marcus thought about all the moments that had led them here. The rainstorm, the coffee, the investigation, the fear and the hope, and the decision to try anyway. Every choice, every risk, every terrifying step forward had brought them to this moment, to this family, to this life. And it was worth it. Every second of fear, every moment of doubt, every risk that could have gone wrong, but didn't. It was worth it. Later, after they'd carried Emma to bed and cleaned up the living room and gotten ready for sleep themselves, Marcus stood in the doorway of Emma's room, watching her breathe in the dim glow of her glow-in-the-dark stars. Ivy appeared beside him, taking his hand. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," Marcus said. "I'm happy. Really, truly happy. And I don't think I knew what that felt like until now." "Yeah," Ivy said softly. "Me too." They stood there together, watching Emma sleep, and Marcus felt the weight of the last 3 years, the fear, the control, the desperate attempt to keep everything from falling apart, finally lift from his shoulders. He'd been so afraid of breaking, so terrified that one wrong move would destroy everything he'd built. But what he'd learned, what this whole messy journey had taught him, was that breaking wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Staying broken was. And he wasn't broken anymore. Neither was Emma. They'd been bent, maybe. Cracked in places. But they'd healed. And they'd healed together, with the help of someone brave enough to love them both. Marcus thought about the man he'd been a year ago. Rigid, controlled. So focused on survival that he'd forgotten how to live. That man wouldn't recognize the person he was now, someone willing to take risks, to trust, to build a life that wasn't about protection, but about possibility. And he didn't miss that version of himself at all. The rain had picked up outside, drumming against the windows with steady persistence. Marcus had always loved the sound of rain. It reminded him of the night everything changed, the night he'd made a choice that seemed small at the time, but turned out to be the beginning of everything. Sometimes the biggest moments in life didn't announce themselves. They came disguised as ordinary choices. Give someone a ride, have a cup of coffee, answer a text, say yes when it would be easier to say no. Sometimes courage looked like offering help in a rainstorm. Sometimes love looked like 3 people in an apartment, building a family out of hope and determination and the willingness to try. And sometimes happiness looked like standing in a doorway, watching your daughter sleep, while holding the hand of someone who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Marcus had spent years building walls to keep the pain out. What he'd discovered was that walls kept everything out, including joy, including connection, including the very things that made life worth living. So he'd torn down the walls, and what he'd found on the other side was better than anything he could have built alone. He found family, he found love, he found home. Not the place where he lived, but the people who made living worthwhile. And standing there in the quiet of their apartment, listening to the rain and feeling Ivy's hand in his, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but was easy. Not because it was safe, but because it was real. And real, messy, imperfect, beautiful reality was exactly what he'd been missing. Ivy tugged his hand gently, pulling him away from Emma's doorway and toward their own room. They got into bed, curling together in the darkness, and Marcus felt peace settle over him like a blanket. "I love you," he said into the quiet. "I love you too," Ivy whispered back. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, 3 people slept soundly, safe and warm and together. The storm had passed. The family remained. And Marcus Hale, who'd spent 3 years afraid of falling, had finally learned how to fly.